Dr. Umar Johnson stayed silent for over a month. Then he broke it wide open. He says Nolan Wells didn't drown, he was murdered, and the timeline proves it. 30 kids. 3 boats. Only 1 boat investigated. No GPS on the other 2. A best friend, who left him behind with no phone, no keys, then called his mother asking if she'd heard from him, while holding the exact phone she needed. A 911 call with sounds of a struggle in the background. Dr. Umar isn't asking if something's being covered up. He's naming names. Stay till the end. This gets darker.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, though, man. There's so much to get into that I want to get your take on. Nolan Wells, how you feel about that situation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nolan Wells. You know, when the case first broke, Art, I just kind of sat back because I knew the YouTubian struggle streamers were going to run with it. I knew the white liberals on YouTube were going to run with it. I knew the white racists on YouTube were going to run with it. And everybody in between. It hurts my heart for Sister Christine, Nolan's mother, to have to see so many people using her son's name and crisis and tragedy for clickbait. And that's one of the biggest reasons, Art, I kind of stood back. It almost reminded me of the Freddie Gray police unaliving in Baltimore back during the Barack Obama era. When Freddie Gray lost his life to those police in Baltimore, everybody rushed to Baltimore. They did the same thing with Michael Brown in Ferguson, not because they necessarily cared about the tragedy, but because they wanted to benefit personally from it. And so I stayed away from Ferguson. I stayed away from Baltimore, and I stayed away from the Nolan Wells situation for a while because I didn't want to look like so many other people who just jumped in to have something to say, to use that young man's loss of life for clickbait and views. Now that it's been over a month since he lost his life, I think it's okay for me to speak now. Now let's take a closer look at this, Art. According to what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and what I've read, Nolan, Warren, Wyatt, and Trayston left for Horn Island the morning of July 4th. According to Warren's own words that he offered during an interview with Officer B.T. Coon, that's Coon as in C-U-N-E, Coon as in K-H-E-W-N, Coon as in K-U-H-N, Coon as in C-O-N-N. So Warren did a sit down with Officer B.T. Coon. And as we all know, B.T. Coon is white YouTube's pet monkey. He's white YouTube's pet monkey. So Warren sat down for an interview with white YouTube's pet monkey. And he said that they left for Horns Island the morning of July the 4th, and that it was approximately 30 of them spread across 3 boats. Approximately 30 youth spread across 3 boats. They all went to Horn Island together. They arrived at approximately 11:30. So they left around 9-ish, 8, 9-ish, whatever the case may be. They left the morning of July 4th. They arrived on White Devil's Horn Island at about 11:30. So 3 boats, 30 youth, they went together. I'm not clear on whether the 3 boats came back together or not. That's another question that I have, Art. Did they come back together the same way they left together? Because I'm treating all 30 of those white youth and all 3 of those ships as crime scenes and as suspects. All 3 ships are potential crime scenes. All 3 boats are potential crime scenes, and all 30 youth are potential suspects. I don't know why Jackson County Sheriff Ledbetter or Jackson County District Attorney Mulrath, I don't know why they decided to separate the boat that Nolan was on. Warren's boat, I don't know why they separated that boat from the other 2 for purposes of investigation and analysis. because those three boats operated as a team. And since they went out there as a team, and it hasn't been made clear to me whether or not they came back together as a team, all 30 white youth and all three boats should have been part of this investigation, not just the one boat. That is my first big issue with this case. Who decided to separate the other two boats and the other 20 or so youth? I got a problem with that, Art, because according to the Cajun Navy, they have no GPS information on the other two boats, Art. They have no GPS information on the other two boats. Now let's get into this. According to Warren and Nolan's other so-called white friends, they decided to leave the island around 4:30. So they were roughly on White Devil's Horn Island from 11:30 to 4:30. That is about 5 hours. About 5 hours. Now, one question that has to be asked, Art, why did y'all leave so soon? Because they party on Horn Island all day long. Y'all didn't leave at sunset. Y'all didn't leave at sundown. Y'all left after only being there 5 hours. That's a little suspicious, Art. And I haven't heard anybody ask any of them, why did y'all decide to leave after only being there for 5 hours? Did y'all plan to only be on White Devil's Horn Island for 5 hours? Why did y'all leave at that time? But we'll deal with that later. So then let's listen to Javon, Nolan's other best friend. Now, another problem I got with this whole story, Art, is Nolan allegedly had too many best friends. I'm trying to find out, how does Nolan have so many best friends? And why did all of these so-called best friends leave their best friend on White Devil's Horn Island without his cell phone and keys? I'm trying to figure this out. So Javon claims he's Nolan's best friend. Warren claims he's Nolan's best friend. And Trayston allegedly claims that he's Warren's best friend. So did Warren have three best friends? Excuse me. Did Nolan have three best friends? Did Nolan have 13 best friends? Did Nolan have 30 best friends? Because if Javon is the best friend of Nolan, and if Warren is the best friend of Nolan, and if Trayston is the best friend of Nolan, exactly how many best friends did Nolan have? Are y'all making this up? Who did Nolan tell Warren was his best friend? Who did Nolan ever tell Trayston was his best friend? I'm not going to question Javon, because he's a brother. And I do believe that there's a strong chance that they may have been best friends. And I say that not only because Javon is a brother, Art, but I also felt that Javon, through the investigation team and alley-oop, with some of the answers that he gave on TMZ. Some of Javon's answers, in my opinion, kind of made it clear to me he actually cared about Nolan. He actually cared about Nolan. I believe Javon actually cared about Nolan. And because of that, I'm willing to say that Javon may have actually been Nolan's best friend. I wish somebody would have asked Javon, Art, to your knowledge, has Nolan ever called Warren his best friend? Has Nolan ever called Trayston his best friend? To your knowledge, Javon, has Nolan ever told you that Warren and Trayston were best friends of his? Because, Art, I'm having a problem with this three best friend narrative. Okay? I used to be 18 years old. You might have one best friend. You may have two. Don't get me wrong. If you all hang in a pack, you could have three best friends. But according to Javon's own words, Art, he didn't really hang around with them other guys too much. That's what I allegedly thought I heard him say. He didn't hang around with them guys too much. So if you got 2 or 3 or 4 best friends, you guys normally travel as a group. Javon seemed like he kind of spent most of his time with Nolan alone, just the two of them, not with Trayston And Warren, although he knew them, it didn't appear that he hung out with them on the regular. So how could they all then be best friends? It's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's unlikely. So, according to Javon Art, he saw Nolan at 3:40 on the island. According to Javon, what I heard him say to TMZ allegedly was that he had another friend who was involved in an altercation and that he left Nolan at about 3:40 to go check on his buddy, because according to Javon, his buddy was on another ship and the parents of whomever on this other ship were trying to get him off the island because he was crashing out. He never said who this friend was. He never exactly told us what happened. But he said, I left at 3:40 to go check on my friend on another boat because, quote unquote, well, these are not his words, I'm paraphrasing, he was kind of wilding out, crashing out, and he needed to help calm him down. I'm paraphrasing. He said when he got back, Nolan was nowhere to be found, and I'm paraphrasing. And Nolan's boat that he came on, Warren's boat, the so-called Big Daddy, the 22-foot Triton, had already left the scene. So according to Javon, I left Nolan at 3:40 to go deal with another situation. I came back, he was gone. According to Katie, the white girl who Nolan's white best friends are trying to use as an alibi in this situation. Okay, because they claim, and Warren said the same thing to Officer B.T. Coon when he spoke with him. They claim that Nolan told them, I'm going to hang back on this island and talk to Katie. You guys go ahead and I'll get back however I get back. Again, I'm paraphrasing. But guess what? We learned through Katie's sister that Katie said she has no knowledge of Nolan ever saying that.
For over a month, Dr. Umar Johnson stayed silent on the Nolan Wells case. And according to him, that silence was deliberate. He explains that the moment this story broke, he knew exactly what was coming. The YouTube struggle streamers, the white liberal commentators, the white racist trolls, everybody looking to cash in. And what bothered him most wasn't the tragedy itself. It was watching strangers turn a grieving mother's pain into content. He compares it directly to what happened after Freddie Gray died in police custody in Baltimore and after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. In both cases, he says, people flooded in, not out of genuine concern, but to build their own platforms off someone else's loss. So this time, he chose to hold back. No rushed reaction. No clickbait take. He wanted to wait until he actually had something worth saying. Now, more than a month later, Dr. Umar says it's time to talk, and he starts by laying out the timeline as he understands it. On the morning of July 4th, Nolan Wells left for Horn Island along with his friends Warren, Wyatt, and Trakan. But this wasn't a small group. According to Warren's own account, given during an interview, roughly 30 young people set out together, spread across 3 separate boats. They arrived on the island around 11:30 in the morning. Here's where Dr. Umar raises his first major red flag. Only one of those 3 boats, the one Nolan was on, became the focus of the investigation. The other 2 boats, carrying roughly 20 more young people, were never treated the same way. He questions why Jackson County investigators separated that one boat from the rest when all 3 boats left together as a group. And he points out something even more troubling. There's reportedly no GPS data available for the other 2 boats. To him, that's not a minor gap. If all 30 kids went out together, he argues, then every single one of them, and every boat, should be treated as part of the same investigation. Then there's the timing. The group left the island around 4 to 4:30 in the afternoon, meaning they were only actually there for about 5 hours. Dr. Umar finds that unusual. Horn Island is typically a full-day hangout spot, especially on a holiday like the 4th of July. So why leave so early? Why not stay until sunset like everyone normally does? It's a question he says nobody has directly asked the group, and one he believes deserves an answer. From there, the story gets even murkier. Multiple people have come forward claiming to be Nolan's best friend, Javon, Warren, and even Tristan, who reportedly considered himself close with Warren. Dr. Umar isn't buying the idea that Nolan had 3 or 4 separate best friends who barely interacted with each other. He gives Javon more benefit of the doubt, based on how he came across in interviews, genuine, emotional, someone who seemed to actually care. But he still wants clarity. Did Nolan ever personally call any of these guys his best friend? Or is that label being applied after the fact? According to Javon, he last saw Nolan around 3:40 in the afternoon, before stepping away to check on a friend who was having a heated altercation on another boat. When he returned, Nolan was gone, and so was Warren's boat, the one Nolan had come on. Then there's the account involving a girl named Katie. Warren and others claim Nolan chose to stay behind to talk with her, planning to find his own way back later. But Katie's own sister has since said Katie has no memory of Nolan ever saying that at all. Piece by piece, Dr. Umar is laying out inconsistencies most people missed, and setting the stage for exactly why he believes this case deserves far more scrutiny than it's gotten so far.
And Katie said her conversation with Nolan was between 3 and 4:30. So you know what that means, Art? We can pretty much digest, conclude that Nolan was likely to have been unalived, Art, sometime within the hour of 3:30 to 4:30. I'm going to insinuate that Nolan's life was taken because I do not believe he accidentally drowned. If he drowned, he was forcibly drowned, and we'll get to that in a minute. If Nolan drowned, he was forcibly drowned. He did not accidentally drown. He was a great swimmer. Miss me with the nonsense. That boy did not drown. If he drowned, it was by force. So again, Art, all 3 of these people, arguably the last 3 to see him alive, except for those who took his life, Katie, the coach, and Javon, are arguably the last 3 people to see Nolan alive, except for those who took his life on that boat, allegedly. That's my position. So they're all basically cutting off around 3:30, Art. Remember, they made the call for the emergency sea tow at 4 o'clock. Javon said he cut out 3:40. The coach, 3:30. They made the call at 4 o'clock. That conversation we heard, the sea tow call, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that took place at 4. It sounded like there was some struggling going on in the background. Nolan could have been getting unalived while they were making the call, Art. Nolan could have been getting unalived while they were making the call. Nolan could have been getting choked out while they was on the phone with Cito. So again, Art, my position is Nolan lost his life somewhere within the hour of 3:30 to 4:30. Now, before we go any further, Art, I need Ben Crump investigation team and Sheriff Ledbetter's investigation team to have a conversation with Javon, because according to Javon's statements on TMZ, the police never spoke to him. And I have serious concerns with the manner in which this investigation has been carried out so far, Art. I have very serious concerns with the manner in which this investigation has been carried out so far. So anyway, Javon said police never spoke with him. Why? We need a conversation with Javon, not because I think he's a suspect. I believe Javon is innocent, but we need to find out what he knows. That's number one. We also need a conversation, Art, with the coach. Who is this coach that Sister Christine said contacted her and told her he had a conversation with Nolan on the island between 2:30 and 3:30? We need to find out what he knows. And according to Katie's sister, she is already cooperating with the authorities. But here's why those 3 got to be spoken to, Art. Not only so we find out what they know, Art, but did they see each other during their conversation with Nolan? Because Javon, if you was talking to Nolan and left him at 3:40, And if Katie was talking to Nolan sometime between 3 and 4:30, and if the coach was talking to Nolan between 3:30 and 4:30, Art, at least two of you should have ran into each other. Did the coach see Javon? Did Javon see the coach? Did the coach see Katie? Did Katie see the coach? Did Katie see Javon? Did the coach see Katie? Art, if all three of them are saying they saw Nolan for the last time, roughly within the same hour, hour and a half, Art, did y'all run into each other? Let me tell you why I'm asking this question, Art. And I'm not throwing no shade at my brother Javon. I like Javon. I'm not throwing no shade at Miss Katie McCormick. I don't know her. I'm not throwing no shade at the coach, Art. But the reason I need to know why all y'all put your time within the same frame and you may have not possibly seen one another, Art, are you guys keeping yourself out of the window of witnessing this crime by saying you didn't see him after 3:30? I want you to follow what I'm saying here, Art. It's kind of interesting that they all saw him last at 3:30, not after 3:30. Javon 3:40, roughly 3:30. My point is, Art, for all three of them to have the same exact time, if they did not see each other at all during these conversations with Nolan, are they pushing up the window of time during which they saw Nolan so they cannot be included in this investigation as a witness to a crime? In other words, Art, I don't think Javon had nothing to do with it. I know he didn't. But is he saying he saw Nolan a little earlier than he saw him so he can't be pulled into the investigation? I don't think Katie had nothing to do with the crime, but is Katie putting her conversation with Nolan a little earlier than it actually took place to make sure she can't be dragged into the investigation as a witness to a crime? Is it possible that the coach is putting his conversation with Nolan earlier than what it was, Art, to make sure he cannot get dragged into the investigation? I don't think they had anything to do with it. But they could have been a witness to a homicide, Art. They could have been witness to a homicide. If they did not see each other, if none of those three people, the coach, Javon, and Katie, if they did not see each other at all talking to Nolan, if none of them saw each other talking to Nolan, at least two of them are lying about the time they last saw Nolan. Are you following me, Art? All I'm saying is I have my suspicions as to whether or not this convenient 3:30 cutoff window, I have my suspicions that this convenient 3:30 cutoff window may have not actually been the time they saw Nolan. They may have saw Nolan closer to the time he lost his life. Now stay with me, Art. I want to back up for a minute. And I want to say this to Brother Elmore, Nolan's stepfather. And I want to say this to Coach Tracy, who I believe was one of Nolan's coaches. Brother Elmore, the stepfather, and Coach Tracy, the coach, both said on national television, Art, that they don't think race played a role in this at all. Elmore, Tracy, two dark-skinned black men in Mississippi, and both of them said on national television, I don't think race had anything to do with this case. I am disappointed in Brother Elmore. I am disappointed in Coach Tracy. How dare you help these young people avoid the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. federal hate crimes law, Art, by you saying you don't think this had anything to do with race, Brother Elmore and Coach Tracy. You are helping these white folks avoid federal hate crimes charges. And let me tell you why this is important, Art. Let me tell you why this is important. Under the federal hate crimes law, Matthew Shepard, James Byrd, signed by Barack Obama, 2009. Under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, you can go to jail for life. You can go to jail for life under the federal hate crimes law. So if you can go to jail for life under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, why is Nolan's stepfather and coach telling white folks they don't think it had anything to do with race? I still love my brother Elmore. I still love my brother Coach Tracy. But would y'all please watch what comes out of your mouth during this investigation? Because you are undermining justice for Nolan.
Now Dr. Umar starts connecting the dots. And this is where his theory really takes shape. He points out something critical. Katie herself said her conversation with Nolan happened somewhere between 3 o'clock and 4:30 in the afternoon. Put that together with everything else we already know, and Dr. Umar says the picture becomes clear. In his view, Nolan likely lost his life somewhere within that 1-hour window, between 3:30 and 4:30 on the afternoon of July 4th. And he's not holding back on what he believes actually happened. Dr. Umar flatly rejects the idea that this was an accidental drowning. He reminds viewers that Nolan was known to be a strong, capable swimmer, so as far as he's concerned, there's no version of this story where Nolan simply slipped under the water on his own. If he did drown, Dr. Umar insists it wasn't an accident. It was forced. That leads him to a pointed observation. 3 people, Katie, a coach who apparently spoke with Nolan on the island, and Javen, are, by their own accounts, the last people to have interacted with Nolan before he disappeared. Setting aside whoever may have actually been responsible for his death, these 3 represent the final known contact points. And when you line up the timeline, it gets even tighter. Javen says he left Nolan's side around 3:40. The coach's conversation reportedly wrapped up around 3:30. And the emergency call for help wasn't made until 4 o'clock. Dr. Umar brings up that call specifically, the one that was placed to alert others something was wrong, and says that if you listen closely, there's audio suggesting some kind of struggle happening in the background. His unsettling theory, Nolan may have already been in danger, possibly being physically overpowered at the very moment that call was being made. So in Dr. Umar's assessment, the window for when Nolan lost his life narrows down to roughly 3:30 to 4:30 that afternoon. But he doesn't stop at the timeline. He raises serious concerns about how the investigation itself has been handled. According to what Javen has said publicly, including in a TMZ interview, law enforcement never actually reached out to speak with him directly. Dr. Umar finds that hard to accept. If Javen was one of the last people to see Nolan, why hasn't there been a formal conversation with him? He's clear that this isn't about suspecting Javen of wrongdoing. In fact, he says plainly that he believes Javen is innocent. This is about the basic thoroughness of an investigation into a young man's death. The same goes for the mystery coach that Nolan's mother, Christine, mentioned, someone who reportedly told her he'd spoken with Nolan on the island sometime between 2:30 and 3:30. Dr. Umar wants to know, who is this coach, and has anyone formally interviewed him? As for Katie, her sister has stated that she is already cooperating with investigators, which Dr. Umar acknowledges, but he still wants more clarity around her account. Here's where his argument gets especially sharp. He raises a question that, once you hear it, is hard to unhear. If Javen, Katie, and the coach were all supposedly talking with Nolan during roughly the same overlapping window, within that same hour and a half, shouldn't at least 2 of them have crossed paths with each other? Did the coach ever see Javen on the island? Did Javen ever see Katie? Did the coach and Katie ever interact? If none of them recall seeing one another while each was individually spending time with Nolan, Dr. Umar says that raises a real red flag. He's careful here. He says he's not accusing any of these 3 of hurting Nolan. He genuinely doesn't believe any of them were involved in his death. But he raises an uncomfortable possibility. Is it conceivable that all 3 of them are shifting the timeline of their last contact with Nolan slightly earlier than it actually happened, not because they did anything wrong, but simply to avoid being pulled into the investigation as witnesses to whatever occurred? He finds it curious that all 3 conveniently placed their final interaction with Nolan right around that same 3:30 mark and not any later. If that cutoff isn't accurate, if their actual last contact with Nolan happened closer to when he actually lost his life, Then, in Dr. Umar's words, at least 2 of these 3 people may not be telling the full truth about the timing, whether intentionally or not. And if that's the case, 1 or more of them could have unknowingly witnessed something connected to what happened to Nolan, without even realizing it. Then Dr. Umar shifts the conversation in a direction that's clearly personal for him, and pulls no punches doing it. He turns his attention to Nolan's stepfather, Elmore, and to a man he identifies as one of Nolan's coaches, Coach Tracy. Both men, in national television appearances, stated publicly that they don't believe race played any role in what happened to Nolan. Dr. Umar makes a point of noting that both men are black, and he says he's genuinely disappointed in both of them for making that statement. In his view, by publicly downplaying the possibility that race was a factor, they may be inadvertently helping shield anyone involved from being prosecuted under federal hate crime law, specifically the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which was signed into law by President Obama in 2009. Dr. Umar stresses just how serious that law is. Convictions under it can carry a life sentence. So his question to Elmore and Coach Tracy is direct. Why get in front of cameras and dismiss race as a factor before the investigation has even run its course? He's careful to say he still cares about both men personally, but he urges them to be more mindful of what they say publicly while this case is still being investigated, arguing that their comments could end up working against the pursuit of justice for Nolan. With that, Dr. Umar has laid out his full theory of the timeline, raised pointed questions about the thoroughness of the investigation, and opened up a much bigger conversation about race, accountability, and what he sees as missed opportunities to hold the right people responsible.
I hope you're listening, Brother Elmore. And I hope you're listening, Coach Tracy. You are undermining justice for Nolan by saying you don't think race had anything to do with it. How in the hell do you know? How do you know if race had anything to do with it? How well do you know these young people? It was 30 of them, Art. It was damn near 30 white youth spread across 3 boats. How many of them did Elmore know? How many of them did Coach Tracy know? So how are you going to go on TV and say, I don't think it had anything to do with race? Why are you helping them avoid accountability for what they may have done? I don't know if they did it, Art. You don't know if they did it. They don't know if they did it. And they definitely don't know if it was motivated by race. What they should have said, Art, is what Javon said. And that's why I like the young brother Javon. That's why I like that young brother Javon. His mother, Sister Tashima, shout out to you. You raised a good kid. When TMZ asked Javon if he thought it had anything to do with race, Art, when TMZ asked Javon if he thought this had anything to do with race, he said, what? I don't want to answer that question. I don't want to answer that question. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Or, Art, they could have said, I don't know. Nolan's stepfather could have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. Coach Tracy should have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. But to say you don't think it had to do with race when he was the only black boy across 3 ships? Are you out of your mind? Why would you say that and help them avoid the Federal Hate Crimes Act? Javon gave a better answer than those 2 black men. Javon, a child, gave a better answer than those 2 black men, Art, when he said, I don't want to answer the question. And shout out to Javon, Art. He's intelligent. You know why? Because by saying, I don't want to answer the question, he answered the question. Of course, race has something to do with it. This is the United States of America. Race has something to do with everything involving black people. The country was built on the backs of black people. It's maintained on black people. We are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system, overrepresented in the unemployment line, under the poverty line. Of course, everything in this country has to do with race. And I'm disappointed in us, Art, that we are so afraid to call racism what it is, that we literally got people asking us, when a white person takes the life of a black person, do you think it had anything to do with race? When a police officer takes the life or shoots a black person, do you think it had anything to do? What kind of idiotic gaslighting question is this, Art? All white people are racist. All white people are racist. So we can stop asking if it had anything to do with race. If it's black and it's white, it has something to do with race because all white people are racist. That's just how it is. Now let's get back to this. Before we deal with the infamous Cito call, Art, I got a few questions for Warren. I want to deal with that infamous Cito call, Art. And I want to deal with Sister Tashima and Sister Christine's visit to Warren's home to get Nolan's cell phone. I want to deal with them two in a minute. But before I go there, I got a couple questions for Warren and his white friends. Nolan's best friend, and Warren even called Nolan his brother, Art. He even called him his brother. He said they spent the night together before they went out to White Devil's Horn Island, Art. The night before, July 3rd, they stayed in the same home. How do you stay in the same home with somebody, Art, and leave them on an island? How do you sleep in the same house with somebody July 3rd and then leave them on an island July 4th? But I got a few questions for Warren. No disrespect. I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty, but I got a few questions for you, Warren. Since you could sit down and interview with Officer B.T. Coon, I need you to sit down and interview with Dr. Umar Ifatunde. So you can sit down and interview with Officer B.T. Coon, I want you to sit down and interview with Dr. Umar Ifatunde. My first question to Warren, you said that Nolan is a best friend of yours, that he's like a brother. I have a question. If Nolan is your brother and best friend, why did you leave him on that island, especially when you all were drinking? Because somebody put a report out there, Art, that Nolan had been drinking heavily and was intoxicated. Of course, that allegation was dismissed because the coach who contacted Sister Christine confirmed that he spoke to Nolan between 2:30 and 3:30 and Nolan was not intoxicated. So they lied to protect their friends because white people are always on code, Art. Not a single white person on that island dropped a dime yet. Not one of them. So anyway, Art, they tried to blame it on him being drunk. So he was just a drunk black kid who walked into the water and drowned. That's the narrative they wanted us to swallow. He was just a drunk black kid who walked into the water and drowned. And remember, Art, Sheriff Ledbetter allegedly ruled the case an accidental drowning before he did any investigation. He ruled Nolan's death an accidental drowning before he did any investigation. As far as I'm concerned, that meets the definition of public corruption. As far as I'm concerned, that meets the definition of public corruption. But stand with Warren, Art. Warren, if Nolan is your brother and best friend, why did you leave him on an island without his cell phone and his keys? Why did you take his cell phone and keys back to the mainland? You left him there and took his cell phone and keys back. Can you please explain that to me? What person wants to be on an island without their phone? Help me understand that, Warren. I don't know of an 18-year-old who wants to be anywhere without their phone, Art. They don't want to be in school without their phone. They don't want to be at home without their phone. They don't want to be out of town without their phone. They don't want to be at the mall, the movies, the restaurant. They don't want to be nowhere without their phone, let alone on an island with no way to get off. You left your best friend on an island, your so-called brother. You left him on an island with no way to get off, and you took his phone and his keys. Can you explain that to me, Warren? While you're thinking about it, I got another question for you, Warren, while you're thinking about it. You said at 11 o'clock, you called Miss Christine to see if she heard from her son. Warren said, Art, I called Miss Christine to see if she heard from Nolan. She said she had not heard from Nolan. Can I ask you a question, Warren? If you took his phone How in the hell was his mother supposed to hear from her son when you have the son's phone? Did you tell Miss Christine that you had her son's phone when you called her? I bet you didn't. I bet you didn't. Think about that, Art. He called the mother and asked her if she heard from her son. But he knows she didn't hear from her son, Art, because he has her son's phone. How can the mother hear from Nolan when you have Nolan's cell phone and you left him on an island? And I bet you didn't tell her you had his phone. Because if she knew you had his phone, Art, she would not have had to use Life 360 to find the phone. If you had his phone and you called her at 11 o'clock to see if Nolan was okay, why didn't you tell Nolan's mom you had his phone? Why did my sister Christine and my sister Tashima have to use Life 360 to find their son's phone? Because you playing games. You playing games. You playing in our face like we stupid. That's what this is. I don't know if he did it, Art, but he damn sure knows who do. I allege and I believe that all 30 of those white kids on all 3 of them boats know exactly which one of them did it, and the rest of them are covering it up. And guess what, Warren? And the rest of you 30 white kids on those 3 boats, let me explain something to you. Federal hate crimes law, you can go to jail for the rest of your life in case nobody didn't tell you. Federal hate crimes law, you can go to jail for the rest of your life in case nobody told you. Guess what? The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, you can go to jail for up to 30 years. And if Nolan was unalived by more than one person, that constitutes a lynching. That constitutes a lynching. So you can go to jail for up to 30 on the Emmett Till Act. You can go to jail for life on the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Hate Crimes Act. And in the state of Mississippi, Art, if you are an accessory after the fact, not accomplice. Accomplice means you participated in the murder. Accessory means you helped cover it up afterwards.
Dr. Umar doesn't let up. He circles right back to Nolan's stepfather, Elmore, and Coach Tracy, and this time he goes even harder at them. His argument is simple but pointed. How could either man possibly know with any certainty that race had nothing to do with what happened to Nolan? He reminds his audience that this wasn't a one-on-one situation. It was roughly 30 white teenagers spread across 3 boats. So his question becomes personal. How many of those 30 kids did Elmore actually know? How many of them had Coach Tracy ever met, spoken to, or spent real time around? In Dr. Umar's eyes, neither man had any real basis to go on national television and rule out race as a factor. And by doing so, he argues, they weren't just speculating, they were, whether they realized it or not, giving cover to anyone who may have been involved, making it that much harder to pursue federal hate crime charges down the line. This is where Dr. Umar draws a sharp contrast, and where his admiration for Javon really comes through. When TMZ asked Javon directly whether he thought race played a role in Nolan's death, Javon didn't try to answer definitively either way. He said he simply didn't want to answer that question. And Dr. Umar treats that response almost like a masterclass in media literacy. In his view, I don't want to answer that wasn't evasive, it was smart, honest, and self-aware. It didn't rule anything in or out. It didn't hand anyone a talking point. Dr. Umar contrasts that with what Elmore and Coach Tracy said, arguing that a teenager managed to give a more careful, more responsible answer than 2 grown men did. From there, Dr. Umar broadens the conversation into something much bigger than just this one case. He argues that in a country built on the systems it was built on, race is never fully separate from any interaction between black and white Americans, not because every situation is automatically racially motivated in a simple sense, but because the entire framework people are operating inside of, socially, economically, legally, carries that history with it. He points to well-documented disparities, disproportionate representation in the criminal justice system, higher unemployment rates, and disproportionate poverty rates among Black Americans. His broader frustration is aimed at what he sees as a pattern in how these conversations get framed in the media, where, whenever a white person is connected to the death of a black person, commentators and reporters ask whether race had anything to do with it, almost as a formality, before quickly moving past the question. To Dr. Umar, that pattern itself is part of the problem. With that broader point made, he shifts gears completely and turns his focus toward Warren, and this is where the interview gets noticeably more direct. Before getting into what he calls the infamous 911 call, and before addressing a visit that Nolan's mother, Christine, and another woman he refers to as Sister Tashima made to Warren's home to retrieve Nolan's phone, Dr. Umar says he has a few questions of his own for Warren first. He acknowledges that Warren has referred to Nolan not just as a best friend, but as a brother, and that the two of them reportedly spent the night together at the same house on July 3rd, the night before they all headed out to Horn Island together on the 4th. Dr. Umar finds that detail hard to reconcile with what happened next. If the two of them were close enough to be under the same roof the night before, how does that same closeness result in Nolan being left behind on an island the very next day? He's careful to frame this part as questions, not accusations. He repeats more than once that he isn't declaring Warren guilty, and he isn't declaring him innocent either. But he says that if Warren was willing to sit down for an interview with another YouTube personality, he should be just as willing to answer questions directly, on the record, about the day's events. His first real question to Warren centers on the claim that surfaced early on, suggesting Nolan had been drinking heavily and may have been intoxicated. Dr. Umar points out that this claim doesn't hold up, because the same coach who reportedly spoke with Nolan between 2:30 and 3:30 that afternoon has said Nolan did not appear intoxicated at that time. In Dr. Umar's interpretation, the intoxication narrative was floated specifically to make an accidental drowning sound more plausible, essentially, he argues, shaping the story so that people would accept it as, a young man who had too much to drink wandered into the water and drowned. He's openly skeptical of that framing, especially combined with something else that bothers him a great deal, that the local sheriff reportedly classified Nolan's death as an accidental drowning before a full investigation had even been carried out. To Dr. Umar, ruling on a cause of death that quickly, ahead of a real investigative process, isn't just premature. He goes as far as to call it a form of public corruption. Then he returns to Warren with a second, more pointed question. Why would Warren leave his so-called best friend, his brother, alone on an island, without his cell phone, and without his keys? Dr. Umar leans hard into this point, because to him, it doesn't add up at all. He asks his audience to think about any 18-year-old they know. Would any of them willingly be anywhere without their phone? Not at school, not at home, not out with friends, and especially not stranded somewhere with no way to call for help or arrange a ride. The idea that Nolan would have voluntarily agreed to stay behind on an island, cut off from contact, strikes Dr. Umar as deeply implausible. He wants Warren to explain, in his own words, exactly why that phone and those keys ended up back on the mainland while Nolan stayed behind. While he's on that thread, Dr. Umar raises what he considers an even bigger inconsistency. Warren has said that around 11 o'clock that night, he called Nolan's mother, Christine, to ask if she'd heard from her son. But here's the problem, as Dr. Umar lays it out. If Warren had Nolan's phone the entire time, how exactly was Christine supposed to have heard from Nolan at all? He questions whether Warren told her, during that call, that he was the one holding her son's phone. Dr. Umar strongly suspects he didn't, because if Christine had known that detail, she and Tashima wouldn't have needed to use the phone tracking app Life 360 just to try to locate Nolan's phone themselves. To Dr. Umar, that detail alone raises serious questions. Why would you call a mother to ask if she's heard from her missing son, while knowingly holding the exact device she'd need to hear from him? And why leave her to go find that phone on her own instead of simply telling her where it was? This is where Dr. Umar's language becomes its most forceful. He states plainly that he doesn't know for certain whether Warren was directly involved in what happened to Nolan. But he says he believes Warren very likely knows more than he's shared publicly, specifically, who among the roughly 30 young people on those 3 boats may have been responsible. Going further, he suggests that all 30 of them may know exactly what happened and who was involved, and that the rest could be participating, knowingly or not, in covering it up. From there, Dr. Umar pivots into a warning aimed squarely at Warren and the other young people who were present that day. He lays out in blunt terms the legal stakes as he understands them. Under federal hate crimes law, he notes, a conviction can carry a life sentence. He also brings up the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, explaining that it can carry penalties of up to 30 years, and he raises the possibility that if more than one person was involved in taking Nolan's life, that could legally qualify as a lynching under that statute. He goes on to explain the distinction, as he understands it, between being an accomplice to a crime, someone who actively participates in it, versus being an accessory after the fact, someone who helps conceal a crime that's already occurred, which under Mississippi law can carry its own serious consequences. By the end of this segment, Dr. Umar has moved from raising timeline questions to challenging the public statements of Nolan's own family to directly confronting Warren with a series of pointed, specific questions about the phone, the keys, and the call to Nolan's mother, all while making clear that, in his eyes, the full truth of what happened on Horn Island that day is still being withheld from the public, and possibly from investigators as well.
If you are an accessory to the fact after the fact, Art, you can go to jail for up to 20 years, Mississippi law. So they can go to jail for up to 20 years, Mississippi law. Accessory after the fact, you helped to cover up the crime. You can go to jail for 30 years on the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, because more than one of you probably participated in Nolan's unaliving. And under the Matthew Shepard James Berg Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, they can go to jail for life. And this is why I need Nolan's step pop and coach to watch what comes out of their mouth and stop trying to help these white kids avoid accountability for what they did to Nolan. Because if the tables will turn, white folks are not going to try to help your child avoid any accountability. So stop the now. Another question I have for Warren. You said you and Nolan been friends since 8th grade. Since 8th grade, Art. But Sister Christine says she don't know none of them kids really, Art. She don't know them white kids. So help me understand how you are Nolan's best friend, friends since 8th grade. You called him your brother. Y'all spent the night together July the 3rd, the morning before y'all went to White Devil's Horn Island. And his mother don't even know who you are. And you said out your own mouth that y'all never hung out at Nolan's house. So how are y'all best friends? I had best friends growing up, Art. My mother knew who they were. Who has a best friend that they mom don't know about? Help me understand that. A best friend and the mom don't know him? It sounds suspicious. Why didn't you tell Miss Christine you had her son's cell phone when you called and asked if she heard from him? Art, as far as I'm concerned, there's probable cause he has something to do with this. Art, I'm holding her son's cell phone. I left him on the island. I took his keys and phone. And I'm on the phone with the mom. I got his phone. But I'm calling his mother at 11 o'clock. Have you heard from your son? And I'm holding her son's cell phone, and I don't even tell her. Art, this ain't making no sense. This ain't making no sense. And I want to know from Sheriff John Ledbetter, Art, Jackson County Sheriff, you don't have probable cause just off of that alone? Somebody calls somebody's mom asking if she heard from him while they have their phone and left him stranded on the island. And if you care so much about Nolan, Art, if he cares so much about Nolan, the so-called white best friend, Art, why did you wait till 11 o'clock? Y'all left the island 4:30. Y'all left the island 4:30. If you care so much about Nolan, why are you not calling his mother until 11 o'clock? It's pitch black outside at 11 o'clock, Art. It's pitch black. It's almost midnight, and you wait till 11 o'clock to call his mom and ask her if she heard from her son, but he's supposed to be your brother and best friend. Listen here, Warren. I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. And then I have a question for his dad too, Art. I don't know if you know this, but his dad has started an online fundraising platform for Warren and two of his friends. I think they raised $160,000 so far. $160,000. Nobody has been arrested. Nobody has received a warrant. Nobody has been indicted. Nobody has been charged. Art, if you are innocent, why are you raising money online? You ain't been charged with a crime at all. The state of Mississippi is doing everything they can to make sure y'all don't get charged with anything. So why are you raising money online? Why did y'all cancel your social media? Why are y'all lawyering up? They hired Donald Trump's lawyer, Art. One of Donald Trump's lawyers is now the three of their lawyers. If you innocent, what you need Donald Trump's lawyer for? If you're innocent, what you raising $160,000 for? It sounds like y'all getting ready to defend yourselves. That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like y'all think the truth is going to get out really, really soon, and y'all want to be prepared for it. Again, Art, I'm not saying he did it, but I definitely believe he knows who do. Now, we're going to get to this call. But before we get to this call, Art, I'm going to ask a question to Benjamin Crump. Attorney Benjamin Crump. I met him twice, Art. I met Benjamin Crump the day before I graduated with my doctorate at an Urban League conference in New Orleans. I presented at a workshop at the Urban League conference in New Orleans. This is July of 2012. And I flew back to graduate and get my doctorate in clinical psychology. We had lunch. It's a few of us at the table. We had lunch. Okay. This is around the Trayvon era. And then I met Benjamin Crump again at HBCU Delaware State University about 3 or 4 years ago at the Black Farmers Conference that was put on by one of the black professors there. She invited me to keynote the luncheon, and she switched me out at the last minute for Attorney Benjamin Crump. I understand it was a black bourgeoisie event. I'm not a member of the black bourgeoisie. I got switched out. I understand. No harm, no foul. Ben Crump gave a good speech. But here's my question to Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton. Art. How long are y'all going to wait around before y'all call a spade a spade? How long is Ben Crump and Al Sharpton going to wait around, Art, before they tell the world that they don't think this investigation is being done correctly? How long before Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton demand that the FBI and Department of Justice take over this investigation? Art, it's been over a month and we know nothing. It's been over a month and we know nothing. Now, let me say this, Art. There's several circumstances through which you can demand the FBI come in and take over an investigation. One of them, Art, if there is a suspicion of public corruption or obstruction of justice. The FBI, the Department of Justice, can come in and take over a case on the suspicion of public corruption or obstruction of justice. So you're going to say, Dr. Umar, what evidence do you have of that? First of all, they declared this an accidental drowning before they did any investigation. That's a cover-up. Not only that, Art, they never treated the boat like a crime scene. They never took a look at the other 2 boats. We have no information at all on the other 2 boats. Those 30 white kids should have had their cell phones confiscated, investigated. All their social media should have been investigated. Their homes should have been investigated. They should have all been interrogated. They should have been investigated to see if they or their parents had any connection to any of the white hate groups in the state of Mississippi. None of that was done. They gave the boat back to the owner, Art. They gave the boat back. The boat may have been a crime scene, and they gave it back. Now, according to the Cajun Navy, another question for Ben Crump, Art. According to the Cajun Navy, they offered Ben Crump to put dogs on the boat and let the dogs sniff it out to see if anybody had recently been deceased on that boat or if there had been any blood on that boat. And according to the representative from the Cajun Navy, Ben Crump told him don't do it. So I need Ben Crump, respectfully, I'm not accusing him of nothing, Art, But I need Ben Crump to explain to me why you didn't let them use the dogs to sniff out that boat. Why did you not let them sniff out that boat with them dogs? Did you have your own dogs to sniff out the boat? Because if you didn't, why didn't you let them sniff the boat out with the dogs? The dogs can tell, Art, if somebody had recently lost their life or if blood had been spilled. He said Ben Crump told him no. I need Ben Crump to explain that. I need Sheriff John Ledbetter to explain why the boat wasn't treated as a crime scene, potential crime scene. I need him to explain why all them white kids wasn't arrested and questioned, because if it was black kids and a white kid went missing, Art, they would have all been arrested and questioned. You know that. They would have all been arrested and questioned. And then let's talk about the autopsy, Art. Let's talk about the autopsy. So the Mississippi State Medical Examiner, they do their autopsy July 7th, right? July 7th. And then Nolan's mother requested an independent autopsy, as she should have. They send Nolan's body to Washington, D.C. When the black medical examiner gets Nolan's corpse, Art, the throat tissue and the lung tissue is gone. How is he supposed to determine if Nolan died from being choked out or if Nolan died from drowning if he don't have the throat tissue or the lung tissue, Art? How is he supposed to do his job and y'all didn't send the throat tissue or the lung tissue? And nobody has explained yet whether or not the medical examiner in D.C. is ever going to get the throat tissue or the lung tissue. And I personally believe, Art, I personally believe Nolan was deceased before he hit the water. I believe Nolan was deceased before he hit the water. And the reason they held on to the throat tissue and the reason they held on to the lung tissue is they didn't want nobody to know that Nolan was murdered before he hit that water. Just like Emmett Till was murdered before he hit that water. Just like Dr. King's brother, A.D. King, was murdered before he hit that water. Remember, Art, when Dr. King's brother was murdered, Reverend A.D. King, they found him in a swimming pool. They ruled it a drowning. And then one of the paramedics said what, Art? One of the paramedics who took Dr. King's brother out the pool, Art, said he didn't have no water in his lungs. The paramedic said he didn't have no water in his lungs, Art. And plus, A.D. King, just like Nolan, A.D. King, just like Nolan, was a great swimmer, Art. Was a great swimmer. They kept them lungs, I believe. They kept the lungs, Art, because they knew that those lungs would have provided evidence of the fact that Nolan may have been deceased before he hit that water. They kept the throat because it may have shown some trauma that Nolan may have gotten choked out. And then you got the red substance around the back of the head that the DC medical examiner discussed. We don't know if Nolan got hit in the back of the head. We don't know if the blood simply drained to the back of the head. But here's the thing, Art. They say Nolan was found face down in the water. Nolan was found face down in the water, Art. Not only that, Nolan was transported face down to Washington, D.C. So guess what, Art? I have my doubts as to whether or not the red, which is probably blood in the back of the head, the subcutaneous red area, Art, I don't think that has anything to do with the blood draining to the back. You want to know why? Because he was found floating on his face and he was sent to Washington, D.C. on his face. So the blood couldn't have went backwards, Art. I believe Nolan got hit in the back of the head, and it was that hit that cost him his life. It was that hit that cost him his life. It was that hit that cost him his life. Now, with that being said, Art, I want to go to Sister Tashima and Sister Christine going over to Warren's home, allegedly, to get Nolan's phone. So Sister Christine reported Nolan missing around 12:22 p.m. on the 4th. Sometime after that, her and Sister Tashima, Javon's mom, used Life 360 Art, and they tracked the phone to Warren's home. I believe it was Warren's home. Don't hold me to that. I believe it was, no, I think it was one over the friend's home, lady friend's home. I think Warren said they were swimming at a lady friend's home. Whoever house it was one of them kids who was out there on White Devil Horns Island. So they tracked the phone to this house, Art. And Sister Tashima said when they opened up the door, the house was dark. You know why the house was dark, Art? They turned the lights off so they wouldn't recognize nobody's face.